Hello and welcome back to another World of Warcraft lore video. Today we're going to be covering the Mantid, and I know that everyone has probably seen these guys in the game, but I don't think that many people actually know their full-on history and the lore behind them, because it is actually rather interesting. So these guys go back a very, very long time. They were actually created by the old gods, way before the time of the Titans and the Sundering and all those events. They're actually a part of the Akir branch of creatures, which includes the Nairubians and the Kiraj. So about 16,000 years ago, there was a very large war. This was between the Trolls and the Akir. The Trolls eventually were rather victorious, and they split the Akir into two factions, of course them being the Kiraj and the Nairubians. Now this is where we actually run into a little bit of an issue with the Mantid, because these were inserted into the game with the Mists of Pandaria expansion. The best reason that we have for their them not participating in this war is that they were too far to the south to actually participate in any meaningful way. Of course, you have to remember that that at this time, all the land masses in the game were one large continent called Kalimdor, and these guys were way, way, way down to the very south. That would have been under modern-day Tanaris. Alright, so with all that done, basically the Akir were split off, and the Mantid were pretty much chilling out on their own at the bottom of the continent. So each of the Akir colonies actually worshipped an old god, with the Mantid worshipping Yasharaj, the Nairubians worshipping Yogg-Saron, and the Akir worshipping Cthulhu. So overall, not really a nice crowd of people. Anyway, when the Sundering happened, Xiaohao managed to surround the continents in the mist, which caused Pandaria to basically float away unscathed from the events of the Sundering. The Mantid then basically, after this, advanced through two long steps. They pushed out the Angol, and this basically gave them access to the amber-giving Kapari trees. I'll talk a little bit more about amber later on in the video. So, what we do know is that the main documented parts of the Mantid history happen after the Pandaren uprising against the Mogu. The Mantid and the Mogu did have quite a large fight, and it could be presumed that this was before the events of the Sundering. But anyway, 12,000 years ago, the Pandaren uprising happened. They were the main race on Pandaria, and this is when of course, the Mantid started to attack them. So the Mantid would actually come in these giant swarms, which would attack in rather predictable intervals. The Pandaren at this time had built the Serpent Spine Wall, which is basically the Great Wall of China, but even with that, many Pandaren died in every single attack, and overall, just a lot of death happened. It wasn't particularly nice to be on either side of the wall, really. Now, these cycles of attacks would happen over quite a long duration, and any survivors from a previous cycle would re-enter the Mantid society at a higher position than when they had started. This form of aggressive selection meant that each subsequent swarm was more powerful than the previous one. Overall, though, it was definitely becoming quite a large problem for the Pandaren, with some of the modern swarms really nearly just pushing them to the brink. More recently, though, the Mantid have ran into a number of problems. Their empress, shek'zeer, has been possessed by the Shah of Fear, and this Shah has caused her to basically run her empire into the ground, which has caused a lot of upheaval, because they're not a hive mind, they're actually singular, individual, intelligent beings. So a lot of the Mantid weren't particularly happy with what shek'zeer was doing. This, though, was mainly in the form of the Klaxi. Now, the Klaxi are a group of Mantid elders who are charged with maintaining the Mantid culture and ensuring the longevity of the Empire. They decided the Empress had to be killed because her mind was not her own. And this whole upheaval is basically the reason why the latest Mantid swarm actually came 10 years early. The Pandaren didn't see this coming because the swarms had basically came like clockwork beforehand, so they were hit far harder than usual. In-game, though, we managed to dismantle their empire, we caused massive casualties, killed the Queen, killed the Shah of Fear, and then at the Siege of Orgrimmar we killed the warriors of the Klaxi. I guess it could be presumed that it would be relatively easy to mop up the rest of them. Anyway, so that's basically most of their history covered. Let's just talk a little bit about their culture, which is actually kind of interesting. So we've all heard them ramble on about amber incessantly through the game, quite a lot. And well, as it turns out, amber is one of the pillars of their society. It's used for pretty much everything. They eat it, they build with it, they make weapons from it, and they even use it for this long-range communication technique that involves using amber to amplify and resonate their sound. And this basically is probably just on a frequency that can't be heard by other species, meaning that they can kind of talk to each other from extremely long distances. Now, of course, as I said earlier, they are intelligent individual creatures, and I guess that that maybe some people just would have assumed that because they're bugs, they operate on some kind of hive mind basis. This isn't the case, and what the Empress actually does is she orders them around using this kind of resonation communication. The actual Empresses themselves are very, very long-lived, but they're not immortal, and it is the Klaxi who are responsible for choosing a subsequent one once the previous one dies. So then, these swarms are kind of interesting, actually, and the swarms are a rite of passage within the Mantid, and Mantid only mature into like a fully grown and aware adult individual after taking part in one of these swarms. This process actually kills off the weak and it leaves only the strong, with their main purpose being to create a strong society that will be ready to serve their old god Y'Shaarj if he should return. And because he's an old god, well, he probably will return at some point. Of course, we killed his heart, but his essence is still floating around the place somewhere. Still though, I have a feeling that we will not be seeing Y'Shaarj again in World of Warcraft. Anyway, that is it for this quick sort of look over the Mantid society and culture and history. Overall, they're a pretty interesting race, but I just wish that I enjoyed the raid a little bit more. Wasn't the biggest fan of it. Anyway, that's it for the video. If you have any suggestions for future lore topics, please leave them in the description. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.